Hi, and welcome to this talk on project planning. Now in this talk, over a series on the playlist, we'll have a look at why projects ought to be planned, some of the purpose of the project planning itself, so aside from the motive, what should project planning achieve, have a brief look at some of the popular methods, because I can't describe the whole thing in any detail, and briefly review the process of planning a project. So we'll start with the motive. Why should you plan a project? Why can't you just sort of sit down and work it out as you go? And this approach is called muddle through. And I have to admit that there are some circumstances where this is probably the most reasonable approach to take. But it is not where you know better. And here you should know better. So projects, although they're becoming more unpredictable as people are tackling less well understood problems, there is still no reason why in software development at least you can't do some level of project planning. I have seen engineers who did insist on just, I'll work it out as I go. And disappointingly, the estimates were that their project took about 1.5 to twice as long as it should have done. And obviously it cost 1.5 to twice as much as it should have cost. This is not a ringing endorsement for your career prospects when you do that kind of thing. So working it out as you go invariably encounters problems later in the project that you really ought to have avoided if you thought about it earlier. So there are those problems. Most of the time, though, you need to work out what are the main dependencies, what are the main risks, what are you going to do first, and how are you going to deal with the risks, and how are you going to do things. You need to arrange the work so that you reduce the risks gradually, and increasingly now you need to arrange the work so that you learn what you need to learn in a timely fashion. Learning or lack of knowledge becomes a risk in itself, but I'd like to separate those two, and I'll explain later why. You also need to arrange the task so that you expose assumptions as early as possible, because believe me, it is a really horrifying feeling to come to, I think it was about a month before delivery, and find that some absolutely essential component just didn't function the way we thought it was going to function. So that's not nice. Now, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to do planning. In a perfect world, you would have perfect knowledge of what's in front of you. Okay? Now, this is often put forward as an expression of what's wrong with waterfall planning. Waterfall planning, that is planning everything in advance, assumes you have perfect knowledge and you can predict everything, because the waterfall, the plan-based approach, is the most efficient. It assumes that nothing will go wrong and you will not have to undo anything, you'll not have to repeat anything. That is the most efficient way to do work if you can. The problem is, I've yet to see a software development project that could. Invariably, there were things that didn't go well and they had to repeat or back up and start again, or it just didn't go so good. All right? So that's what you have to do in the planning. As I say, in a perfect world you wouldn't have to do that, but this is not a perfect world, and you will have to do some planning, at least to get the major things sorted out. Now, my observation about planning is that at the early stages, planning is more about avoiding disaster than achieving success. It's like so many things. In the first lap of the race, you can't win it. You can lose it, but you can't win it. All right? You win on the last lap of the race, not the first one. So that's a certain amount about project planning.